Before Scandinavian ships carried armies overseas, Bloomery furnaces were turning local ores into the iron that made movement possible. Expansion demanded more than sharp blades because every vessel, farm, workshop, and wagon consumed iron in quieter forms. Yet historians cannot simply count surviving weapons and declare iron the single cause of the Viking Age. Two explanations compete. Abundant northern production enabled expansion, or growing exchange stimulated producers to enlarge an older industry. Archaeology supports parts of both arguments, while refusing the comfort of a simple beginning. Ironmaking had deep Scandinavian roots long before the first recorded raids of the late 8th century. Communities smelted bog ore, lake ore, and other deposits whose quality varied sharply between landscapes. Unlike modern blast furnaces, Bloomery furnaces did not melt iron into a freely flowing liquid. Heat and reducing gases separated metal from ore, leaving a spongy bloom tangled with slag. Smiths then reheated and hammered that bloom, squeezing out impurities before shaping workable bars. Each stage required judgment that rarely survives in written sources from the people performing it. Furnace walls, slag heaps, charcoal pits, hammer scale, and unfinished metal preserve fragments of their decisions. These remains place production beside forests, wetlands, farms, and routes rather than inside one centralized industrial district. Ore alone was useless without charcoal, and charcoal demanded large quantities of carefully managed wood. Smelters, therefore, coordinated seasonal labor across resource zones that might lie far from major settlements. Someone dug ore, another prepared fuel, while skilled workers controlled air and temperature around the furnace. The resulting bloom still needed repeated working before a shipwright or farmer could trust it. Iron was never merely found beneath Scandinavian soil. Labor and knowledge made it available. That distinction matters when estimating whether natural resources automatically produced maritime power. Rich deposits could remain unproductive wherever fuel, transport expertise, or political security proved insufficient. Conversely, modest sources could support valuable output when communities organized those constraints effectively. Large slag concentrations in parts of Norway and Sweden reveal production beyond immediate household repair. Some northern districts made forms of bar iron suited for storage, transport, and further working elsewhere. A bar could cross regional boundaries without revealing the name or identity of its original smelter. This separation between production and finishing created chains, linking forest furnaces with coastal smithies and markets. No surviving account maps every hand in those chains, so archaeological context carries much of the explanation. Metal analysis can characterize composition and manufacturing choices, but identifying one precise ore source is often difficult. Slag records a technical process more directly than it records ownership, taxation, or destination. Even impressive production waste cannot tell whether a magnate commanded labor or households negotiated exchange independently. The industry was therefore substantial, dispersed, and socially variable rather than a single Scandinavian enterprise. Consider the ship, the celebrated machine of overseas expansion from its least celebrated metal components. Clinker-built planks were commonly fastened with iron rivets whose ends were secured inside the hull. Caulking, timber selection, and skilled carpentry kept water out, but fastenings helped the flexible shell remain coherent. A seaworthy vessel could require many individually forged fittings, each small enough to disappear in heroic storytelling. Anchors, chains, tools, and repair materials added further demands before any cargo entered the hold. Shipbuilders relied on axes, adzes, augers, chisels, and other edged implements that needed maintenance. Woodworking edges dulled, rivets failed, and voyages carried metal away from the furnaces that supplied it. Expansion consequently multiplied replacement needs across ports, farmsteads, winter quarters, and newly established settlements. The iron supporting mobility was a stream of consumable pieces, not one permanent investment. Warships display this dependency clearly, although cargo vessels and ordinary boats participated in the same material system. Weapons formed another visible branch, but grave finds distort their importance by surviving in selected ritual contexts. A sword required considerable skill and material, whereas spearheads and arrowheads placed different demands upon smiths. Mail, where used, represented an especially labor-intensive concentration of numerous linked iron rings. None of these objects proves that every Scandinavian man possessed comparable equipment or fought abroad. Armed retinues depended upon unequal access to metals, skilled smiths, food, and political patronage. Iron could strengthen elite power because leaders redistributed equipment and protected production networks. However, the same substance remained indispensable to households beyond any warrior retinue. Knives cut food and worked materials, while shears, needles, and specialized tools supported textile and craft production. Agricultural implements helped prepare soil, harvest crops, and process the food sustaining travelers and animals. Iron fittings reinforced locks, chests, wagons, buildings, and equipment whose wooden portions often decayed. Archaeological preservation, therefore, makes metal appear isolated from the larger objects it once animated. A mounted fitting may be the surviving edge of an otherwise vanished system of timber, leather, rope, and labor. This preservation bias encourages modern viewers to imagine an iron-dominated world rather than an iron-dependent organic one. Correction does not reduce iron's importance. It shows why small components had enormous leverage. One sharpened edge could accelerate woodworking, and one batch of rivets could join planks into transport capacity. Such leverage connected remote production with political ambitions along the Scandinavian coasts. Markets offered places where iron bars, finished tools, repairs, food, and information could change hands. Birka's connections included iron from regions around the Mälaren Basin and farther north. Hedeby received goods through Baltic, continental, and North Sea networks, including metal moving through intermediaries. These exchanges do not demonstrate one integrated northern market governed by uniform prices. They reveal overlapping circuits in which iron could travel farther than its makers ever did. Demand also moved inland through rivers, paths, and seasonal meeting places rarely documented in texts. Transport costs favored compact, valuable material, making workable iron suitable for movement from forest districts. Political authorities could profit by protecting routes, controlling markets, demanding tribute, or attracting dependent specialists. Exactly how such control operated differed by place and changed across the Viking Age. Royal claims from later centuries should not be projected backward onto every early furnace. Still, concentrated settlements created dependable demand that encouraged specialized production and repeated supply. This makes expansion both a consumer and an organizer of the iron industry. Voyages removed tools and weapons from Scandinavia, but they also brought silver into northern exchange systems. Imported silver could reward followers, purchase supplies, and alter the scale at which leaders mobilized resources. Iron and silver served different purposes, yet their circulation could reinforce the same expanding political networks. Silver attracted attention because hoards survived dramatically. Iron commonly rusted, broke, or entered recycling. Smiths could weld, reshape, and reuse material, obscuring the number of earlier objects behind one final artifact. Recycling was practical in a world where every usable piece embodied ore, fuel, transport, and skilled labor. It also complicates archaeological estimates of total production and consumption. Expansion carried Scandinavian ironworking traditions abroad, though local materials and craftspeople also shaped colonial economies. Settlers in the North Atlantic needed tools for building, farming, boat repair, and processing animal resources. Access to fresh iron was uneven, making conservation and repair especially important in resource-poor settings. Across the British Isles, Scandinavian newcomers entered regions that already possessed established metalworking traditions. Their success cannot be credited to a uniquely northern monopoly on iron technology. Frankish, Insular, Baltic, and Slavic communities likewise produced sophisticated weapons, tools, and fittings. The Scandinavian advantage, where one existed, lay in organizing materials with ships, labor, alliances, and opportunity. Iron enabled that organization without predetermining who would raid, trade, migrate, or settle. This conclusion resolves the apparent contest between supply and demand only partly. Older productive knowledge furnished capacity before overseas expansion accelerated consumption. Growing maritime networks then connected producers, smiths, patrons, and users across greater distances. In turn, increased demand could intensify extraction and encourage bar iron to circulate more widely. The relationship was recursive. Production supported movement, and movement enlarged the system requiring production. What remains uncertain is the balance between household choice, specialist enterprise, and elite command in particular regions. A slag heap can establish repeated smelting, but not the terms under which workers surrendered their product. Written sources say little about the people cutting fuel, tending furnaces, or hammering blooms in Scandinavian interiors. Their physical output, nevertheless, appears inside ships, settlements, tools, and military equipment. Expansion rested upon these workers, even when chronicles noticed only rulers and raiders. The decisive evidence is not a magnificent sword, but the repeated conversion of difficult ore into dependable, transportable metal. That conversion joined woodland resources to coastal shipyards and distant communities. It also imposed environmental costs through charcoal consumption, although their scale varied with local production and woodland management. What can already be defended is a system rather than an isolated invention. Scandinavian expansion required navigable ships, political coalitions, agricultural surpluses, timber, textiles, and favorable circumstances. Iron entered each of those conditions as an enabling material, never acting alone. The industry behind expansion was powerful precisely because its products became almost invisible once they began doing their work.